Hey y'all, so I wanted to talk about something very brief and specifically parts of creating a website. Now, not the actual website layout itself, but the parts of a website. And this is going to be a very brief, high overview of a website, but I wanted to kind of address certain things because there's certain things that I wanted to talk about with that. So there's three parts, if you will, to creating a website, and that is the domain or the name of the website, the website itself, and then also the server, or what's also commonly called the hosting of the website. And with those three things, I want to relate it more closely to real estate. So when it comes to real estate, you have the land, you have your house, and then you also have the address. And that's really kind of what the website is. So you have the land, which is the hosting or the server, whichever one you want to call it, but you have the land, which is the host. Now, what's interesting about that is that you can also take that another way, is that when you're building a website, you actually own that land. So when you are posting on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, you are posting or you are renting out somebody else's land. But when you have your own website, you're actually putting something on your own land. So when it comes to your website, you have the hosting. There's a lot of different hosts out there, and if you're interested in finding out which ones I use, or if you are interested in trying to figure that out, definitely leave a comment or send me a message. But your host is going to be the land upon which you're going to put your house, your website, on there. And when it comes to that, it doesn't matter if you're doing a custom coded website, it doesn't matter even if you're using another platform like Wix or Squarespace, because they have hosting as well. Now they're kind of integrated, but we're talking about maybe like a custom website, even a WordPress website. So you're thinking your website itself is going to go on the host as well as the host. So your website is going on the host. So your house is going on the land itself. Then you also now need to have a address to point people. So 123 Main Street, wherever you're at. Or in the case of the website, www.something.com. Now that's human readable, right? Technically, your website is going to be different numbers, like what's called an IP address. We're not really going to talk about that because that's just for the computers to be able to communicate back and forth. But when we think of a domain, of an address, is www.google.com, Amazon, whatever.com. That is what your address is. So 123 Main Street. So you have three parts of your website. You have the domain or the address, the website itself or the house, and the land or the server, the hosting itself. And I always want to stress and kind of point out that I prefer to have a separation of concern. So what I mean by that is that it's usually better, and other people have different opinions about this, but let me say this and then I'll explain why. But I like to have a separation of concern. So I don't necessarily like to have the host also host not just the website, but also the domain. I like to have those separate. So in other words, you may buy it off of Namecheap, Porkbun, GoDaddy, something like that. Google used to do Google domains, but now now they sold it to Squarespace. So I like to have the address hosted somewhere else. I like to buy it somewhere else. And not only that, when I am working with the client, I have them buy it. I'm not buying it, they own it. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes, let's say that you're with a company and maybe they go out of business, or maybe they decide, hey, we're adjusting our business, or, worst of worst, hey, we need to move because this isn't working out, right? So for some reason, you need to move your website. If they own your domain, sometimes they can be very difficult to work with to get that domain back from them. So that's why I always have the client buy the domain. They own the domain. They own their business, if you will. They own that street address. So it's always important to own your domain, and whether that you buy it off of GoDaddy or Squarespace or Porkbun or Namecheap or fill in the blank. There's a lot of different places that you can buy it, but I always like to have that separate than anything else. Then you also have the hosting, and the hosting is also separate. A lot of times you have these platforms, Square, Wix, Webflow, whatever. And I'm not trying to bash on them or anything like that. But the thing is, though, is that when Wix goes down, all of Wix goes down. Any Wix website, any Squarespace, all of those go down. So that's why I like to have that separate from the domain. And so when you're building like a WordPress website, which is typically what I build in our WordPress websites, I have the domain is the domain, you have the website, and then you have the hosting. And all three of those are now put onto the hosting. But now what you're doing is that you're pointing, we're going to get technical here, you're pointing that address to say, hey, 123 Main Street or www.mybusiness.com is now pointing to this plot of land over here so that people know how to get to your website. It is important to also remember when it comes to your hosting and when it comes to your domain, there's a couple things that you want to think about for all of them. So now you have your land, you have the house, you have the address, and you have all of that set up. So a couple things you want to think of, and again, just a high level overview, but a couple things you want to think of is security. So you want to have security. So you live at a house and you want to be able to make sure that nobody's able to break in. You want to keep your belongings and your personal stuff or property and people safe. So you want to make sure that you also have security not only at the server level, the land level, so maybe you put a fence around it, you maybe put some alarms around it. You also want to make sure that the site also has security, and you want to make sure that your domain has security. So there's a lot of different things with that. Again, I'm not going to be super technical about this, just want to give you a high level overview, but you want to make sure that you pick a good host that has good server level or land level security. You also want to make sure that if you're using WordPress or whatever you're using, if you're using a custom website, if you're using a platform, you want to make sure that they're using good security on the website itself, especially when it comes to WordPress. A lot of different plugins can help you do that on the website level. So not only do you want to have a fence and maybe some cameras around the land or on the server, you also want to make sure that your website, the house, also has some security on the house itself. So cameras maybe on there and some sort of door chime when the door opens. But you also want to make sure that your domain, and one of the things that you want to make sure when you're purchasing your domain, and most of them will already have this on there, so it's not necessarily something that you have to think about, but they may mention something, maybe an extra level of it, but it's an SSL, and that's where that HTTPS, so that's where the security of that comes in, and you can do domain privacy so people don't necessarily see that it's your name and your business and all that. So you can have different levels of security at each one of those, at the domain, your address, at the home, your website, and the server, your land. And it's important that you have security on all of those, not only for your privacy, but also to keep your website, your server, and your users and your information safe. So, Roger, why are we talking about this? Roger, why are we talking about websites and domains and servers and all that sort of stuff? Well, I've had a couple of clients and a couple of people that I've talked to where maybe they're having trouble getting their domain back, or they're just really not sure what I'm talking about when I say server and shouldn't it be hosted here and all that. Just wanted to kind of clear it up. So when working with me, I always have the company, the client, they own the domain. I host the website, which I build or help them edit or help them rebuild. I host it on my server, on my hosting platform that I use, and that allows it to be fast, secure, and that we can update it. And now we have kind of a separation of concern that they own the domain and I host it for them and I help them edit. As you're a business owner, you got a lot of other things. The last thing you need to do is to become a web maestro as well, right? So that's what I like to do. Wanted to clear that up. I wanted to make sure that was clear because sometimes that can be very confusing because you're a business owner, you're trying to do a whole bunch of things, or you know a business owner, or you're maybe stumbled upon this because you're trying to figure out, well, what is a website? What is a domain? What are all these things? So think of it that way. That's the best way that I like to explain it. So you have your address, your house, and your land, which is the domain, the website, and the server. And that's the very high level overview of how websites work. If you're interested in learning more, send me a message, check out my website, leave a comment if you have any questions about servers or about hosting or about website or domain or anything like that, and I'll do my best to answer that. Thanks so much for checking it out today. I know this was a little different, but just wanted to send this video out, wanted to help you out. If you have any questions, please send me a message, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys later.